Code day today. Code day today. A little useless B-roll here because I gotta get to my 10 minutes. You know how important that is. All right. Woo. It's good to get in. All right. Glasses are fogging up. Imagine the lens is fogging up. Should you learn C++ in 2019? The 2019 edition. So I had to do this edition of the video because I did the 2018 edition, which had over 1 million views. 1 million views. My like to dislike ratio on that video was about 80% like, 20% dislike. And so I guess you could say at least 800,000 people, if the sample is representative of the whole, 800,000 people approved of my message about C++. So in this video, we're going to do the 2019 edition. Before I jump into it, which is going to be on another camera, let me just give you the Reader's Digest, a short version, just in case you're really busy nerds and you don't have the time to watch the whole thing. Number one, would I make C++ the first language I would learn or the first language I would teach somebody? No. Not because it's a bad language, it's because C++, for all its power, because it's probably the fastest, one of the fastest running languages out there. When you write a C++ app, it runs fast compared to so many other languages. But it's complex. That power comes with complexity. Complexity that you're shielded from if you write software in other languages, more modern languages like JavaScript, Java, C#, Python, PHP, Ruby, Dart, and there are many others. So Swift comes to mind. So that number one, would I teach C++ as the first language? No, I would start off the student with something a little bit easier, like a Python or a PHP or a Java even. And then if they wanted to do C++ type programming, and I'll get into that in the main videos, then I would do C++. Is C++ a great language to learn in 2019? Meaning, for most people, this means, are there jobs in C++? The short answer, yes, there are plenty of jobs in C++, but the type of work that you're going to be doing as a C++ programmer is very different from the type of work that you're going to be doing as a JavaScript programmer, as a Java programmer, as a C# programmer, as a Python programmer, as a PHP programmer, as a Dart programmer. The point being is you should recognize what it is C++ programmers do and decide whether or not you want to do that. I'll get into that in the main video. And the final comment, are there going to be lots of jobs in C++ in terms of the number of jobs? Yes, there's quite a few jobs in C++, and there will be for years and years to come. So if you actually jump into C++, you'll be fine. But I think that the need for C++ programmers will slowly, let me emphasize this, slowly diminish over time, because the advantage that C++ brings to the table, and I'll end this part of the video here, the advantage that C++ brings to the table is that it is very fast at runtime. When you write programs in C++, it runs very fast. That's why all the gaming engines are written in C++. On the other hand, C++ is dog slow to write in. It takes a lot more time to get anything done in C++. That's the downside. And I'll end this section of the video with this final point. From a business point of view, because at the end of the day, you're writing code to make money for the business you're writing code for or for yourself, but from a business point of view, it's a lot cheaper to have something written in a much faster to write in language like a Python, even though it's going to be much slower at runtime because CPU and memory is very, very cheap, and it gets cheap gets cheaper every year versus computer programmer time. Staff, especially programmers who are highly paid and highly valuable employees, they're very expensive. So you're much better off saving buckets of time in terms of writing an app, and you do that with modern languages, rather than having a faster app at runtime. So finally, and in summary, if it's not clear, you can get a program out much quicker with much less code, much less expensive writing in a modern language like Python or C# or Java versus writing the same type of program in C++. That's just a general thing. But again, for all you C++ nerds out there, yes, it's true. There are certain things that only C++ can do, where you need maximum power. Anyway, let's jump into the next section of the video. Bye-bye. One of the things you're going to have to remember about C++ is that it was created 30 years, 40 years ago, something like that. It was created at a time when computers were far, far less powerful. The hardware was far less powerful. So you needed to design programming languages that really took advantage of the limited resources in terms of memory and in terms of CPU. Another thing you have to consider is that at that time, I would argue that the industry's overall knowledge about what makes a good programming language, how to design programming languages, how to design frameworks was, 30, 40 years ago. It's not what it is today. Over that period of time, the software industry has learned quite a bit how to write code, how to maintain applications, how to build programs. So you see that reflected in more modern languages that bring to the plate capabilities that just makes it easier to build software. For instance, garbage collection in Java is an example. But even that, Java is still, though newer than C++, of course, it's still a 20-year-old language. So I think, as an example, is Swift. You look at what IBM is doing with the Swift programming language. It's a very sophisticated language where it has all the attributes in terms of ease of use, speed of write times. Basically, you write a lot less code with Swift to get something done versus, say, C++. But at the same time, Swift doesn't suffer from the speed deficits that you see, or the speed problems, or lack of speed that you see in languages like Python or Ruby. So when you're looking at C++ as a language to learn, you have to think about these things. So today, in 2019, C++ is still widely used. There's nothing to lose by learning C++ because so many other languages are from that family, that C family. So if you learn C++, it'll be easy for you to do C. If you want to go lower, you could do Java, you could do Python, not Python, but JavaScript, Dart, PHP to a certain extent. So one of the broader messages on this channel that I try to convey is that, it's fun to look at, okay, what's the hot language, et cetera, but again, if you're looking at software development as a long-term thing, as a long-term career or a business move, where you go into freelancing or you're developing your own apps, you have to understand that you're going to be learning different languages, you're going to be using different languages over time. And when you do reach a level of competence, you're going to go in there and you're going to look at the project at hand, look at the job, and then you're going to pick the language based on what you need to do at that particular moment in time. It's kind of like mixed martial arts, where when UFC first started the Ultimate Fighting Challenge, and you would have different stylists would come on. You would have the judo guy and the karate guy and the kung fu guy and the jiu-jitsu guy, etc. And over time, it evolved, and people realized that to be a well-rounded martial artist, to be a real good fighter, you had to have elements of the ground game, the grappling game. You had a good striking game, kicking, submissions, a good stand-up game with your hands. You had to be truly a mixed martial artist. Same thing with software development. over time, you're going to learn that it's not about what language you use, much in the same way to be a great fighter. It's not about the style. It's about your understanding of fundamentals, in the case of programming, of course, the fundamentals of programming. And these fundamentals are universal across all languages. So whether you decide to learn C++ as your first language, or JavaScript, or Java, or Python, or PHP, it doesn't really matter in the medium and long term, because all this knowledge is shareable across all the different disciplines. Now let's consider market forces now when it comes to programming and learnability. I'll deal with learnability first. When you are learning to program, C++ wouldn't be my first choice to teach with, because of the nature of the language. There's a lot more of it you have to handle. There's a lot more you have to be aware of. Whereas, for example, Java takes care of memory allocation. JavaScript, Java, PHP, Python, Ruby, Dart, they all take care of memory management for you automatically. You don't have to concern yourself with that. Whereas with C++, you do. So there's an extra level of complexity that you're going to have to deal with, besides everything else when you're learning how to program. So if I was looking to learn to program, or if I was teaching somebody to program their first language, I would not be choosing C++, just because there's difficulty that you're going to have to contend with, that you don't have to contend with other languages. When you look at the market, there are jobs in C++, plenty of jobs, but typically these jobs are going to be in areas where they're going to probably want you to have certification or degrees to be able to write that code. Whereas if you go into, let's say, freelance or just PHP web stack development or JavaScript web stack development, you don't need a degree. The certification will help maybe a little bit to get going with that, but it's much more about what your portfolio is. It's much more about what you can show in terms of your skills. Whereas with C++, it's in that realm where I think a lot of the jobs are in larger organizations, or in organizations, in businesses where they're going to want that degree. So if you're coming to this whole programming thing to get a job, to make money, understand that what you're faced with in terms of the job prospects with C++. Yes, there are exceptions. Yes, there's always exceptions to the rules. But for every small independent shop that will hire somebody without a degree with C++ for C++ coding, there's probably 1,000 jobs in PHP. There's probably 1,000 jobs in JavaScript. I hope you get that idea. So there you go. That's, I think, my conclusion, unless I come up with something new. But I think that's my conclusion in terms of, should you learn C++ in 2019? It's a great language, but it's an older language. I think over time, its use case will fade because hardware is getting faster, and because modern languages have a better optimization between the speed of writing, write time speed, which C++ is very slow compared to many other languages, and versus runtime speed. Whereas C++ is still blazingly fast, so it's still used to build gaming engines, or used to write code for maybe IoT devices that don't have very much power. But that is going away because you have modern programming languages that can output very performant code. And with every passing year, the hardware gets faster. So the need for C++ diminishes. I think over time, faster to write languages will beat out faster to run languages, because those speed differences at runtime will be inconsequential. But the big cost of software development will still be there. So there you have it. Well, one last example. I talked about this, I think it was the last video. If you look at AI development, in AI, the most popular language is Python, even though it's dog slow compared to C++. C++ is super fast. What is the solution in the AI world? Well, they write the parts of the AI that need super fast processing. They write that in C++, and then they write everything else in Python. So maybe 5% of the code base might be in C++, maybe 10% max. And what they found, you check out interviews with some of the top AI guys, when they tried to do the whole thing in C++, it took forever. Nothing got done. So what they do is they just write the core engine in C for that speed, C++ rather, and then they write everything else in Python, and to access that core engine, and then they get a lot more done. It's far more productive. So that's just one example of right time speed versus runtime speed, and how that balance is going to play out. And there you go. I hope you like this 29 edition, Should You Learn C++ in 2019. This is the GoPro edition. All right, bye-bye.